First, middle, and last, or just first and last?
Just first and last.
Okay. Carla Downing, Karladowning.
Gloria Downing, Gloria Downing.
May we have your address?
We both live at 725 South Oak Crest in Casper, Wyoming, 82601.
Okay, and your date of birth?
I was born December 10th, 1966 in Casper.
I was born January 13th, 1940, in Starks, spelling it S-T-A-R-K-E, Florida.
How long have you lived in Casper?
I've been here 31 years.
I came to Casper in 1959.
Gloria, why don't we go ahead and start with you then. It's Stark, Florida. Were you in Stark, Florida before coming here, or where were you before coming here?
I was in Lakeland, Florida.
Okay. What brought you to Casper, Wyoming?
I came to Casper because at that time my grandmother was living in Casper. And I had been to school 1 year in Florida. I went to St. Petersburg, Gibbs Junior College. And after going there a year, money with my mom was pretty tight. So my grandmother said to me, if I would come to Wyoming, she would help me. So I came. I got here August of '59, and I enrolled in Casper College.
Okay, we'll pick up on that in a minute. Can I go back to Florida a little bit,
Okay.
if you will? How large was your family? I mean, can you tell me about your family in Florida and what their names were?
Yeah. My grandmother lives there now. Her name is Teresa William LaFleur. I'll spell LaFleur for you. L-A-F-L-E-U-R.
And how would you spell her first name, Teresa?
That's a good one. T-E-A-R-E-A-T-H-E-R.
Okay. Go ahead.
And so I decided to come. I have a brother. His name is Willie Mathis Jr. And another brother, which is Joseph S. Mathis. And he lives in Laramie, Wyoming.
And you were living with your mother, and
I was living with my mother.
your mother's name?
Mamie, M-A-M-I-E, Mathis.
And your father, or?
Deceased. My brother, Willie Joe, he came to Casper, let me see, I want to say he came out in '56.
He's still here?
He lives in Canada now.
What were your experiences in Florida as an African American?
My experiences in Florida was being an Afro-American was that in Florida, you know, you knew who to talk to and who not to talk to. What your, like the water fountains in the bathroom, this is really true. I experienced a lot of that. I went to an all-black school from grade 1 through 12. We had all black teachers. And, I mean, we just hung around with black people. Although now my mother worked as a housekeeper in Lakeland, Florida. And she worked for very prominent lawyers and doctors. And now they were very nice to me, my two brothers, and my mom. They were very nice. We didn't hear the word from them, nigger. Never. You like here, you sit around, kids get together, and they don't mind using the name nigger, in their groups, but don't let nobody else call them that. And this is the way things were in the South. When I graduated from high school, I graduated in 1958. Being an all-black school, we were very classy. Our robes, the boys wore blue robes, the girls wore white robes. And, you know, and to say to the people here in Casper, our graduation was very unified. I mean, there were no shorts, no jeans under those robes. Girls had to wear a dress of some sort, preferably a white when they danced. The boys wore dark colors, and none of them cut off, so you see now. And dress shoes.
So you graduated from high school and then started the junior college in St. Petersburg. And at age 19, you decide to leave the family and come to Wyoming.
Well, but see, I knew my mom was going to come. Because, see, Willie Joe was in high school, but he came out here. He went to NC. And he was the first and only black band director I've seen in Casper. And he marched with NC band and just played his music. His major in college was music.
So your brother Willie Joe came here before you? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, so he was already here.
Yeah.
And he went to NC, okay. Is he still here? No, you just told me he was up in
he's in Kenona,
Canada.
Canada.
Right. What is your grandmother's name here?
Teresa LaFleur.
The one that was living here in Casper?
Uh-huh.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna get this straight now. Let's see. Okay. How did she come to Casper, and where was she before that?
She was in Florida. She came to Casper with people that she worked for. They brought her to Casper.
Who was that?
I want to say the Nicolations, but I don't think that's right. I have to think about that. I would not remember who she worked for. But that's why she came out here. Because they thought for her, too, that the opportunity would be better.
Did she meet them down in Florida?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and tell us about leaving Florida and coming here. How did you do that?
Well, it was hard. I came out on the Greyhound bus. And that was a long ride. And when they told me I was in Casper, Wyoming, the bus at that time came down C Street. And I passed my grandmother's house going to the bus station. And when the bus came to a stop and they told me that I was in Casper, Wyoming, I looked around and I said, oh no, I know they didn't send me to this place. I mean, there was nothing. I didn't see a black person anywhere except my grandmother coming in to pick me up. It was just strange.
Was that the old bus station?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I thought it was really strange. So then my grandma came and I said, Grandma, why would you send me out here to this God-forsaken country? There's nothing, no black people. There's just nothing for us to do. So I said, I want to go back home. But I never returned back home. I've been out here, I went to college a year. Then I got a job at the hospital. I started out as a service clerk. And when I worked for them until 1974. And then I left there and went to work at the J.C. Penney Company. And I left there and went to work for the Wyoming National Bank.
What did you do at JCPenney?
Clerk. And I left in Wyoming. Okay, my next job was I worked for Gulf Chevron.
Gulf. What'd you do at Wyoming National Bank?
I was the clerk.
Okay, then Gulf Chevron.
I was a technician and a draftsman.
Where did you learn drafting?
On the job. And I did have a private tutor. And all I can think of his name is Bob Sheely. Is that right?
My family owned the Waddy Map Company, still does. I don't know if you're familiar with them
Yeah.
now. Yeah. Okay, what was your grandmother's address? Where did you live?
721 C Street.
And how long did you live there then?
I lived with her, I think, a year. I lived with my grandma. Then I got married November 6th, for year 1960.
And who did you marry?
I married Kenneth Downing Sr.
He's not living anymore. Okay. When did he die then?
1984, November 18th.
What did Kenneth do?
Oh, he worked at the hospital as a maintenance man. He worked for, he drove up, no. Okay, he worked for Superior Oil as a custodian. Then from there he worked at the school district.
Is Kenneth from here too, or
No, he's from Kansas.
when did he come from Kansas? Do you remember?
56, I think he was.
Did he come because there were relatives here or friends here too that he knew? We're discovering that that's very, very common.
Yeah.
Children, tell me about your children. Who was firstborn?
Kenneth Jr.
And when was he born?
December 3rd, no, February 3rd, 1961.
Okay, then.
Kurt with a K. He was born September 27th, 1962.
I had Kurt in my class.
And with Carla.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And last Carrie.
Okay, Carrie was born when?
April 3rd. What is it? 74, I think it was.
4 Ks, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are your other kids here in town still, or
Two,
3 of us are here.
three, I forgot.
where?
Kenny, Kurt, and Carla are all here. Carrie and Georgia.
Carrie? Okay, you want to tell us about life in Casper, after you got here, and just generally any experiences you had?
Well, I didn't have a lot of problems, I'll have to say, myself. I mean, because being raised in the South and coming to a new place, I mean, you know what the tactics are in the South. I mean, you know where you go and what you do and whatever. And I found through living here that they don't understand when I say I know how to stand my ground. I know the people in Wyoming don't know how to set that part, if you're in Wyoming, you know, people can talk about you, and you not ever know here. But down there, we knew what was being said and how much. I only experienced one big racial thing with the KKK in Florida. Yeah, the weather was changing, and the kids on the street were saying, everybody got to get in their house before dark, because the K's are coming. And, I mean, when they had heard those words, people would go in and lock them doors, and you didn't even go to the windows to peek out, because you didn't know what was going to come your way. But see, now here, we don't have that here. But then you don't know who's your friend and who's backbiting you. Because out here, I notice they'll look at you and kind of slant back a little bit. But and I say, like in Florida, we really did know. We knew where we could go, what school we could attend, whose yard or playground we could play in. Whereas here, you know, it's all yours to use as you would like. But now I don't know if it has changed an awful lot in Florida. But my family, I still have lots of family down there, but they don't have young kids, and you know, so I haven't heard a whole lot about the use of the name calling or whatever. But see, it's nothing for me to say to Carla, nigger, but nobody else can do that, and nobody of white color. That's frightening me. But that's about it. I don't know.
You talk about what a shock it was to go to that bus station and realize there weren't other black people around other than your grandmother. We interviewed Jimmy and Wardell Smith last weekend, and they talk about coming from a very segregated school system and the culture shock they went through, you know, hitting the public schools here too. What kind of a culture shock did you go through, and how did you adjust to it? And
Well, I went to by me going up to Casper College, which is nearly not as large as it is now. We had the main building, and I would just hang back, you know. I wasn't used to being around white people, and so I didn't even try to be friendly. But there were some of them in the group. I was a nursing student at the time. Were bold enough to come and try to be friendly, and I thought that was pretty nice. And working at the hospital and around, I always hung back. I wouldn't, you know, like walk in and say, "Hey, I'm Gloria Down. Who are you?" I don't say it. And when people said to me, I try to be friendly, you know, and accept it. But then when I can get them off to a more privately place, I'll explain to them why I hung back and didn't greet them with the hi or whatever, because I didn't know at that time what was going on.
After you got married, where did you live then? What was your address?
309 North Park.
Did you at any point, at any time have, was there ever any discrimination against housing, your ability to find housing or anything in this town at that time?
It wasn't for me, by my grandmother being out here. She had taken care of all that. And then when I got married, by Ken, having lived here before me, he knew where to, you know, to find a place. We only lived on Park, I think, a year. And then we moved over to North Washington.
Where on North Washington?
440 and 447.
Very good. I think I could remember my address. Were you involved in any churches here?
Yes.
Which one?
Grace A&E.
You still go there?
Yes.
It's on my agenda sometime. I want to get down here, Reverend Watson's preach. He's really a dynamo, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. Tell me about your experiences at Grace AME, because we are collecting all of that too, for both that and Christ First Missionary.
Okay, at Grace AME, it's the same little white church on North Grant today. They have fixed it up somewhere, and I guess they're going to do even more work this during the summer. But it was, I sang in the choir. I held some offices in the church, like trustees, stewardesses, and something else. Well, with the youth groups too. And it was like, we went to church twice a day on Sunday, okay? Sunday school and morning service. Well, then we ventured off. We had a little YPD department, and that was for all the young kids, the little kids. And we functioned pretty well, depending on what ministry we had at that time. Because the AME church, I think they changed ministry somewhere like every 4 years. And but we would get together with Christ First. That was all that was here at that time, was Christ First and like have song fest and just do our thing, you know, have the reading for kids to have little poems and things written. We had ice cream socials. And the kids, the white kids around here, like, you know, they wanted to get into that, you know, but some of them did, you know. But then there was that few that couldn't.
Get into what?
The groups, right? So the singing groups.
Okay.
So, but we go fishing and they would go with us, and if they had a roller skating party or something. And we, getting a little older into that, we would rent the old Pacific Power and Light building and have socials and things, you know, so that everybody could get together and enjoy themselves. So we would have that, and we'd have potlucks, and it was nice, and it seemed like the kids today are trying to work that way. And I'm hoping that it will work for them, because that means it's a lot of enjoyment.
So it's very family-oriented, extremely family-oriented,
Mhm.
isn't it? Yeah. Were you a member of any of the, like, Dorothy, or who were the first people we interviewed? What was her name? This is,
It was a long time ago.
the Burrows.
Oh,
Right,
that's
yes.
my aunt.
Okay. No, that wasn't the first one then. Because I know that your aunt, oh shoot.
I don't know what you said, I can't remember.
It was right before Chester Broadnax.
I live across the street from my mama.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, she's a member of Grace AME too, and she has some written things, you know, about the
Myrtle Rucker?
Myrtle Rucker, thank you. We've interviewed a lot of people, and that one goes back over a year. And she had, you know, a history of some of the women's
She was a-
organizations
yeah.
there, etc. Do you have anything like that? Any written?
She's got it all.
Do you?
That Mrs. Rucker's got all the written history.
Yeah. If you have anything else, you know, if you go back and have anything else, those are the kinds of things we want to have included in the book too. Any historical documentation from the church and the church activities, and any pictures, anything like that, that would be great. We'll borrow it and get it back to you. Okay.
Okay. Now, Mel Hamilton gave you quite a bit of info about the NAACP and his.
Not so much. I don't think he really got into the
You
NAACP.
gave us
Some of it. Can you tell us about the NAACP?
Well, no, but have you talked to Bill Pierce?
Yes. Yeah, we've interviewed him. Just wondering if there's anything you wanted to share around that. Were you active with the NAACP too?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I was. And like we had, the Golden Orchid Extension, that was
Mhm. What kinds of things would the NAACP, how did the NAACP, how active were they? What difference did they make in the community?
Well, back a few years, they weren't very active in the community. But they rechartered, and they're doing more now than they did back in the day. You know, like that, the Juneteenth, picnic, which is somewhere in June, somewhere between the 17th and the 19th. And that was when they set the slaves free in Texas. And, well, up here we wasn't celebrating it until the charter, till they got rechartered. And we usually go over to the North Casper Park, I think that's what it's called. And you bring colored dishes and the table spread. So, that was NAACP. There was the Atchisonians.
One's from Atchison, Kansas.
You got it.
You would partake in their activities too?
Yeah. Yeah, they did like dances and potluck dinners. And I'd say we was all over Casper, but and not discriminating. But, you know, each little group always had at least maybe one one white person in it as well.
I never told me, so I was not watching that day. I didn't get to play.
Casper, Wyoming in the 60s, did you experience any discrimination anywhere?
I didn't experience any, but there was a lot of discrimination within the city.
Could you specify where and what?
What would be, they weren't allowed certain places.
Such as?
Like that, okay, like some of the bars. And I'm gonna name one, Redmond's Lodge. And the Masons. And they have a number, but I don't know what their number is. The Black Masons couldn't join the White Masons.
What about restaurants?
They let you in, but they take their own time to serve you.
We've heard from more than one person, and I'm sure this was probably in the 50s, but I think back, where black women were not allowed to try on dresses in clothing establishments.
I never experienced
that. We never had that, and that was prior to. Sounds to me like overall Casper's been a really good place for you.
It's been a good place, and like I'm not a troublemaker, so you can see I don't go out looking around for trouble. But and I have lots of white friends. Like the kids tell me, everybody must know you in town. I mean, 'cause I can go to the grocery store and there could be a little school kid in there and they say, "Hi, Granny," and then they have to explain to their parents why they said "Hi, Granny." But I like Casper. I just wish there was more for the young people to do.
we're hearing a lot of, this has been a great place to live, um, but there is subtle discrimination in various places and areas. Would you say that's true?
Right, I would.
Carla,
Yes.
tell us about your life.
Well, born and raised in Casper. Having older brothers, they taught me things that I needed to know as far as going out and where we could play and where we shouldn't play. Because, like she said, discrimination wasn't a big factor as far as people being outrightly saying, I don't like you, I can't play with you because of the color of your skin. I did have one friend, I went over to play with her, and then I wasn't ever allowed over to her house again, and we just never really knew why. We could play together at school, but as far as sleepovers and that kind of stuff, we couldn't do that. Didn't know why.
Where were you
It was
living at
never
this time when you were young?
We were at 440 North Washington.
Okay.
That's where I grew up. That was the house where I stayed. And I went to Head Start. I remember going to Head Start here. And back then it didn't have the connotation that it was for the poor kids. It was just preschool for kids to go to, and it was, my neighbor walked me to Head Start. She was my teacher, so I got to do that. And then I went to Willard for kindergarten through 6th grade. And that grade school was a good experience. I had fun in grade school, and I didn't have problems with friends there because we were all from the same neighborhood, and we just played together on a daily basis, so that was no big deal. There weren't very many black kids there. I think there were, not counting my siblings, there were 4 other people there that I went to school with that I remember, so it wasn't usual to have people of color in the classroom, but
It's
the
interesting
way-
because Jimmy and Wardell, who are a generation ahead of you
Mhm.
now, they had horrible experience. That really just terrible as far as
yeah.
blatant out and out name calling, and
See, and I remember I got in one fight. I was in 5th grade at Willard, and it was after the movie Roots came out, and the white kids were running around talking about how they had, what my dad did to your grandma and that kind of stuff, and the jigaboo and the names that they got off of the movie became words on the playground, and then we were taught to defend ourselves, You were given a name when you were born, you defend your name. So I do remember one serious fight when I was in 5th grade, and it was against boys, and I didn't care. And then that just rolled over, and it kind of, because it was going on in the junior highs, and my brothers had to come pick me up from school to walk me home when that movie was aired, because people kind of went back in time when that movie came out. It was really weird because they started degrading again. It was like, let's go back and see how irritated we can make these people. So we had to walk home in packs so that nobody got jumped on. But that was about the only racial thing that I had. The teachers and stuff like that they were fine. I mean, I would consider myself, I was probably a teacher's pet most of my years. I got to stay and do fun stuff. And
Before you move on, you talked about, you mentioned your brothers again, and you said your brothers taught you, where you could go play, those kinds of things. So your memories when you were young and your brothers telling you can't go here, you can go here, what couldn't you do?
we had a little, what was that? It was not a mini mart, it was just a little corner store. And he didn't like for you to come in there more than 2 kids at a time because he was afraid that you were going to take something. Or he didn't want you using the pop machine. He wanted to see what you were putting in because he thought we would use, I don't even know what it was some silver thing that he thought you could slide in the machine and get free pops out of.
They called them slugs,
And, so we, Carla, don't go there. But Mini Mart was just 4 or 5 blocks away, so we would just ride under the underpass. But they just told me, these are the places where you can go and shop, because they had already experienced it by going there first and being reprimanded for being there or being with more than 2 people at a time. And so they just kind of laid the groundwork out, very protective.
You were lucky.
Well, kind of. In some instances, yes.
Is the tape going okay? You think? Okay. Go ahead, continue.
And, but they just kind of let you know you know, families that they had played with and that might have siblings that I might play with. And, you know, whose houses you couldn't go to because they were just more aware. And with them being older than I was, they just showed me the way before I got myself in trouble. So they just kind of laid that pathwork out. And so, and I just kind of followed them through. It was hard following Kurt through school because Kurt was very bold as far as defending his name. He took that for everything it was worth. And to follow him in school was, because he was known as the terrorist, the bully, because he would fight at the drop of a hat. If you called him out of their name, he was going to fight. ISS and things like that didn't do anything, so then I had the reputation that, oh, this is Kurt's sister, we need to keep an eye on her, and we're just totally opposite. I'm a nice person, and I mean, fighting was not my thing, and
Kurt went through about the same time as Mike Devereaux did.
He was with Mike and Alan.
So I think I had them both in class at the same time.
But that was pretty interesting to do that. But like I said, my school experiences, well, I started disliking school when I had to take history classes because there was no black history. Every time they mentioned black history, everybody immediately went slaves. That's all we ever heard about our people. And that's still pretty evident. Today, I don't know. My nieces and nephews aren't coming home talking about the positive things that blacks have done as far as the world goes and the inventions and things that they've done. And that was the one thing I thought that I was cheated out of, was my history.
This district has a way to go.
And it's, you know, I took a test. We get Ebony Magazine, and they have your black history test in there. And it was phenomenal, the simple things that we don't have a clue about, and the inventions. And it's just really sad.
So you went from Willard into East then?
To East, to Kelly Walsh.
What were your experiences at East? Can you tell us about that?
Oh, at East I was very active in sports. I started sports in 5th grade, actually. And then at East I played basketball, volleyball, track, sang in the choir all 3 years. Did the core classes. Went through the whole process of doing that. Just got really involved because that was something that my parents insisted on that we did, was stay involved with things so that we didn't get in the wrong groups and things like that. So I was very involved. Took the cooking classes and we did a wedding cake like 8th grade for this big wedding. The people saw a cake that we did and they put it in the paper. Yeah, and they called up me and my best friend and said, will you guys do this cake? We saw your cake in the paper that we had to do for a project. Stuff like that. So we got to do that. We were in 4-H, or I was in 4-H. But East was okay. My aunt worked in the cafeteria, so whenever I felt like something was not going right, then I would go down and talk to Aunt Jane in the cafeteria. And
what was Aunt Jane's last name?
Jackson.
Oh.
Yeah. So she was one of the head cooks down there.
Oh yeah, Don's wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I didn't realize she was your aunt. Now I'm gonna have to get all these family connections.
My dad's sister.
Okay.
Yep. So, and at East, the only time I ever got in trouble there as far as race goes was in cooking class. We had to cook a recipe. We had to bring our favorite recipe and prepare it at school. And in our family, people didn't, well, my great aunties and my aunts from the South, and they don't use measuring cups. So we were taught to measure in our hands and things like that. And I cooked my recipe, and she said, write it down, and I was like, and a handful of this and a dash of, I mean, there was no teaspoons, and because you couldn't measure that way. It was just by judgment. And she said, you can't cook that way. And I said, but that's the way my family cooks. And she said, well, that must be a Southern thing. And I said, well, I don't know what it is, but that's it. But I got an F on my project because of that, because I couldn't write down teaspoons and cups of whatever it was. And I just thought, there are lots of people that cook this way. You just don't know it all the time. But that was, and back then, as far as kids treating me different, you definitely knew who grew up in a family of racism and who didn't. And I just picked my friends wisely. I picked the kids that were church kids and we had been together and you kind of knew their families and things like that. And then the kids that, you know, just kind of looked at you, you just knew. They just, the way they carried themselves. And like she said, people that don't want to be around you, if you've been around somebody that's mad at you, when they don't want to be around you, they will move. They will walk into a wall before they have to walk next to you. So you knew who might be looking at you in a different eyesight than what you would have them to look at you in. I just didn't give them the time of day because it wasn't worth my time or effort, and that's the way they wanted to think. That was their choice. But it wasn't my battle to fight for them if that's their process.
Who are some of your friends at East?
Oh, I hung out with Margie Tomlin and Monica Baker, and I hung out with Mary Jackson and Shylin Moon, Terry Carter, Marcia Green, Donna Sanchez. We had a pretty good, I mean, we were a multicultural pot.
I was just going to say that, you know.
We were very mixed as far as race goes. We had a little bit of everything, and people would say, well, why aren't you mad? Why aren't you racist? And I said, you know, there's no reason for me to be a racist because nobody, if you do me wrong, I'm going to be mad at the person, not the race. It's not my, that's because of the way I was brought up, though. My parents talked to us very openly about picking friends and how you do these things in life in general, and how you treat people, and how you treat people is going to affect how they treat you in return. And with the church activity, like she said, we didn't have a lot of free time. The kids today have a lot of free time. We didn't have free time. If we weren't doing school stuff, we were doing church stuff, and that's all there was to it. And baseball. I mean, summers were baseball. That's all we did. They played baseball, I played softball, and my parents kept us very involved.
You had wonderful parents, I know.
So we were pretty excited. I wouldn't trade them because it was fun.
How about Kelly Walsh?
Kelly Walsh was fun. We hung out with the same pot of people. Did volleyball and basketball my sophomore year again until I blew out my knee. And then when I did that and I couldn't participate actively in sports, then I became like a sports manager for the different teams and still got to travel and do the different things. I just couldn't play the games. And I was still doing the choir and took the core activities. I took most of the hard classes until it got to science. Not my bad. What a good teachers again, but then the history again was not there. So that was, and we would ask the questions, didn't our people do anything positive? Well, we're not required to teach that, was the answers that I got when I asked that question, and I thought, it's a cop-out. So,
do you feel that any of them thought you were a troublemaker for bringing it up even?
I don't even think they cared. I don't think the teachers cared. This is what's in the book, and this is what we teach, and you figure out, and some people made it a point to say, well, your parents should be teaching you that. Well, that goes to say, but I think my thought was, I have to learn about your people, so you should have to learn about my people. And, and I said that to a teacher and got kicked out of class. But that was my philosophy at that point, because I told her I'm not watching any more videos on slaves. I'm tired of watching people being hung, because we did do some positive things. So I got booted out of class for that, but for being disrespectful. It wasn't a race issue, but it was for being disrespectful because I raised my voice. But I was just trying to get my point across that you need to teach history. If you're going to teach history, teach all the history. And I think that's something our district needs to get into. They're trying to touch base on it, but they're not doing it yet, I don't think. I
had a conversation with Stan about it too. We've got a long way to go.
It's sad. And it's not just African American history or black history, whatever you want to call it. I mean, you have to look at all those different backgrounds because USA is a melting pot of different cultures, and we're getting one viewpoint of everybody's culture.
The publishers,
and you're missing the rest of the world, and that's sad because when the kids get out there and hit the real world, like she said, it was a shock for her to come to Wyoming. It was a shock for me to go to her hometown because I hadn't been around so many black people in my life. I'm used to being around white people. I stopped in the middle of the airport and didn't know what to do because they let me fly by myself, and I just stood there.
How old were you?
I was 18
Mm-hmm.
and in total shock. And all the myths that you hear about, better hold on to your suitcase because they'll snatch it out of your hand, and hold on to your bag. All that stuff that I'd been hearing, I immediately took my purse and wrapped it around my neck and held it in front of me, got my backpack on the front, just because all I saw was all the black people.
Mm-hmm.
Total shock. And then, but walking through the mall was different because you didn't get followed. And here you do.
How do you mean you get followed?
You get followed when you go to department stores in Casper.
White sales clerks?
Uh-huh. They will follow you if you are of color. Because I turned around and asked the lady, I said, you're so busy watching me that you just missed that lady over there emptying her purse into another purse, leaving hers on the shelf. And she said, oh no, that didn't happen. I said, go open that purse. And she was watching me to see what I was going to take. I said, there's nothing in this store that I can't afford. And people think that's a myth. It's not. They will follow you in these stores here, which is kind of strange. But down there you could shop, and you could actually shop without wondering who was behind you and for what reason. Because I didn't think that that was real evident here, but it is. They still do it.
I'll follow up on that in a minute. What year did you graduate from TW?
85.
One of the things these students did was they researched all the annuals with MC and Kelly Walsh and came up with a graduation list, which turned out to be a lot of names got left off for whatever reason. I don't know, but we've had names added. Now I need to update it. I'll be providing you with a list of that to see if there's any other changes we need to make in it too. So, but I remember we have your name down. And what happened after graduation then? Is that when you went to Florida? And
Well, yeah, my dad passed away that November, and he knew that I had always wanted to go to Disney World. So that was my graduation trip. Was we got to go to Disney World, and my great grandmother that she was talking about that had lived out here is down there, and we hadn't seen her. So we went to Florida to see her and to see the rest of the family that we hadn't got to meet. And then when I got back to Casper, I had already enrolled in Casper College, so education major. I knew in third grade what I wanted to be. I had a really awesome third grade teacher, Mrs. Pavey. She was good, and people say, you know, you looked up to a white lady. People in the black community get real sticky about that because they think that black kids should have black role models. And Mrs. Pavey was my role model because she was so good. She was good with all the kids. She didn't pick out one kid. She picked, everybody was her own. She took them in and she'd help you. So in third grade, I knew I wanted to be a teacher, and I enrolled in Casper College. And then they didn't have the 4-year program. So I did 2 years here and graduated with my associates. And then the next, after my 2 years here, I went to the University of Wyoming and did 2 years there. No, I didn't. That was 2 years. I spent 4 years in college. And I got to come back here and do my student teaching, and I student taught at Fairdale. And then I substituted for a semester, and I was hired the following semester in this district.
was Jake superintendent then, or?
Kirby.
Jake Daly was the superintendent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Kirby, the principal.
Yeah.
You didn't have any trouble getting a job then here?
No, it was actually really funny because when I went to do my perceiver, people knew my family. And so and going through the school district here, they knew who I was. And I did my perceiver with Mr. Joe at East. And then Mr. Kirby, when I did my student teaching, he had played church basketball with my dad, which I had never known that. And then the lady that I did my student teaching under also knew my dad because the school that my dad was a custodian at, her kids went to school there, and they would always come home talking about my dad and how funny and how great he was. So I think I was one up on everybody just because of my recommendations from the different people in the district and because I was a Casper, Wyoming native. So I didn't have any of the the hard times that other people had getting into this district. Because I had heard how hard it was going to be to get into Neutron County, and what they were going to do, and then a black teacher, and the only female black teacher. I mean, I had a lot of weight on my shoulders when I started to interview.
Are you still the only female black teacher?
Uh-huh.
How many African-American teachers are there here in the district?
I think 3. There's Sean Wiggins, Rosie Brown, and myself. And then Nell's the administrator now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it.
And I love them to pieces, too.
So, and it was scary because I thought I had something, I had to be almost better than everybody else so that people would hold me as a valid teacher. And my first year of teaching, I was called a racist by one of my students' parents. His child was very active, I would say, and beat on the other children and got sent home quite a bit. And the dad called the superintendent of schools and said that I was being discriminative against his child and that I needed to be removed from teaching children. So, and the superintendent came to visit me and took a poll of my classroom, and that year I had all white children in my classroom. So it kind of took his validity away from trying to prove me as being a racist, because there was no way I could pick one child out of that entire group of kids. And that's not my nature, and they knew that. But that was the only time I've ever been accused of being a racist in my life.
Was this first grade that you
First grade.
You've been in first grade this whole
Uh-huh.
time. What year were you hired by the district then?
1990. August of 90 was when I got my contract. So, it's been fun. This is my 8th year of teaching, and it's been interesting because there isn't, like when I went through school, like I said, there weren't a lot of minorities. And like my 2nd and 3rd year of teaching, we started taking a poll, the other first grade teacher and I, because all the minorities ended up in my room, which we thought was pretty interesting. She would get all the white kids, and then I would get some of the white kids, and then all the mixed kids, or black kids, or Mexicans. And we kind of went down and asked what's going on, because after about the 2nd year of that, and they said, well, we just thought you would relate to them better. So it was even coming out of our office staff that maybe we should give the mixed racial kids to the black teacher, because she might be able to deal with their experiences. Kind of not true. And so we kind of had to deal with that about my 4th year of teaching, to just tell them to drop their names in a hat and pull those kids and distribute, because it wasn't fair to the kids and it wasn't fair to me, and it just did not work, because I felt like they were trying to put me in a place where I shouldn't have been put. Because I'm also, and in my classroom, I make it a point during Cinco de Mayo to try to find out facts that my first graders can understand about Hispanic background. And during African American History Week, I make it a point to find facts that my kids can take home and learn. And on Martin Luther King Day, the day before they go out on the break, that's what we do. Everything that we do is involved with that. I take my first graders through the process of understanding discrimination. I take their water rights away. I don't use color with them, but I use, like, if you have long sleeves on, you can't use my water fountain during the day. Just so that they know what it was like, and we read stories about that, and I send home a questionnaire to the parents before I do that. But I think kids need to experience things that have happened so that they know what it felt like, and then they get pretty fired up about it, and they want to know more about it. And that's where the school district has got to wake up, because I'm giving them something to feed on, but if nobody else is giving them something to feed on, then they're not going to grow as people and understand different people. And I want them to understand different people, because if they don't learn it young, they're not going to learn it. You've got to teach them when they're young, and so I make it a point to try to find out different things. We don't just do Columbus and George Washington in my room. They've been censored and the whole bit. We were on TV, 3 years ago? My first graders were on TV because a parent questioned that my kids did not understand. So the media came in and questioned my kids without me, and they did. They took the concept, and they knew. I've got the crayons, the multicultural crayons, and we talk about you are not white when they say, well, we're white, you know, and we use paper as contrast, and we talk about skin tones, and black people, they want to know why black people are called black people. You have to explain that to them because they don't understand, and it's just a lack of information that no one has taken that time, but we do the activities and we do it all year long to get them to understand. It's not a one-day process, and that's why I fight with the idea of the kids being out on Martin Luther King Day. I'm not sure whether I'm for it, I guess, if there are activities for them to learn about what the march was, who Martin Luther King was. If we start doing some of the things that Cheyenne does and Denver does, they have festivals going on that are teaching from kindergarten through college of the different pieces of Martin Luther King's life. And a lot of our students see it as a day out. And when we were in school, we used it as a teaching day to do those kinds of things to teach the kids. So.
Yeah, I do the teaching prior to their kindergarten.
Well, and I do that now since we have the day out.
Then I really encourage them to go to the march.
So, and I did this year. I had some first graders there. I was pretty pleased.
Great.
That they no bonus points. I don't pay them to come to those things.
Carla, you need to tell Reverend Watson you want to be more involved with the King Day activities because I think you have some good ideas. It was our group that kind of tripped along and discovered nobody was doing anything to plan the King Day. So I managed to put an ad in the paper, under the calendar of things, and we had an organizing committee. But really, it was like Reverend Pierce was saying, we take care of Afro-American History Month. What's his name? The guy who left. Phillips takes care of that. There's this whole church thing was going on. And so we managed to, really get it going. And Reverend Watson came, and Reverend Pierce got involved then, and Reverend Young. Yeah. And I think they're really going to get it going now, so.
Well, and that's what I think because, you guys have an interest, obviously, because of the project that you're doing. And there are kids out there who have an interest, and we need to feed those kids so that they know what it's about, because they're going to leave Casper, Wyoming, just like I did. And if you go with the wrong mindset, they're going to be in trouble. And that's why they need to learn, because different cultures have different ways of life, and down south is a different place than Wyoming. We've got a kid with us right now, and he said the people here are so friendly. I mean, you can tell that he comes from straight out of the south, because he will not. If he walked in here, he would probably drop his head and wait for you to speak to him first, so he'd know whether you were friendly or not. And I told him, people in Wyoming are generally pretty cool with the black population around here. So, but it's different.
Well, that's kind of what your mom described when she first came. It was she wouldn't go out of her way. I mean, it was all sit back to back, and if they approached me, okay. But, I want to go back to this incident 3 years ago. Describe that the TV, would you explain
When the
that?
TV people came to the school?
What
had happened was it was when they started talking about the Martin Luther King stuff, and they had a round table kind of discussion thing, and
Your
somebody,
kids did, or?
No, it was a bunch of who was it? Shira was there. It was like they did it in the library down in the Crawford room. It was just this round robin thing, and I sat on the panel, and they asked me how do you teach a 6-year-old about discrimination and skin tone, and I explained to them that we do different kinds of projects, and that was when Crayola had come out with those crayons, the multicultural crayons. And I had run across them in Fort Collins and picked up a pack and brought them back to my kids, and I tried an experiment with them. I gave them a blank piece of paper of a body and said, draw yourself. And most of the kids, the white kids said, well, there's no white crayon in here, because there wasn't a white crayon. And the black kids said, there's no black crayon. And I said, look at your skin. What color are you? And then that got them to start looking they put their hand on the paper, and the kids realized, no, I'm not white. I have got some pink colors to my tone, or I've got peach in my skin. And so that just kind of expanded, and they looked at that, and then they started looking at each other. I said, look at your neighbor and describe your neighbor. Draw a picture of your neighbor. And so this whole process just started to expand, and they made a quilt. We called it our Fairdale first grade friendship quilt, and they drew their partner, and then they put in the middle of it, we're all the same, but we're all different, because they started with the same body, but then the skin tones were different, the hair, and people were like, how did you come up on this? And I said it was really easy because that's the way we were taught. That, you know, my parents said, you know, pigmentation. Well, kids don't understand pigmentation. So we went with that, and then I don't know if Josh has gone through it, but my nephew, Kurt, is very light in color. His skin is, we call him yellow. And down when he was in the military, when they were with their dad traveling in the military, the light blacks and the dark blacks even fought against each other, which was just totally insane. But because his skin was lighter, they would tell him that he was a half-breed or this, that, or the other. And then I even had, in my classroom, I had some kids who had been through that, and so we talked about skin colors. And I would bring in pictures of my nieces and nephews who both have black parents, but their skin tones are very different. Because my youngest nephew is as dark as I am, and Kanisha and Kurt Jr. are very light in color, and people just swear that they are half black and half white. But once they get past their color, then they can see them as people and their personality. And that's what I had to do with my kids in the classroom, because I had one little girl who was Spanish, and she spoke Spanish. She had a tutor that had to come into the classroom, and the kids didn't want anything to do with her because she was different. And that's how that whole process got started. Was we talked about the skin tones and read the books, and we did the discrimination thing with the water fountain and who could drink and who couldn't drink. And then when they saw that, and they, you know, and one little boy got downright mad, and he said, "You can't take the water fountain away from me because I have long sleeves on." And I said, "Yes, I can, because it's my water fountain." That's not fair. Why isn't it fair? And then that led into the discussion. And then after we had been through about a week of that, then the media came in to see how much of that my kids took in. And they knew.
Sorry, I didn't see that.
They knew. They questioned them, you know, what is discrimination? And they used the water fountain, and they could tell you, you know, it's treating people unfair just because of the way they look or what they have on.
You talk about treating people unfairly. You talk about the sales clerks who follow you around. Any other subtle types of discrimination or even overt that you...
The only other time, we went to Denny's on the west side after our last party when I graduated. All of us, you know, because people were leaving town, so we thought we would go out to breakfast after graduation, after the big party. And they wouldn't serve us. And they wouldn't serve us. And they wouldn't serve us. I went to the bathroom. The waitress came over. I served them. So we all got up and we left. But we couldn't, you kept thinking, when is she going to come over? And she wouldn't come over, and she wouldn't come over. And I said, wait, you guys, I'm going to the bathroom. And I went in the bathroom and kind of just peeked out the door, and she went right over to the table as soon as I had left the table. So, but other than that, I haven't, like Mom said, people are generally just, if you're nice to them, then they're nice to you, and if they don't want to talk to you, they don't. But here they're real subtle. You know, if they're going to be a racist, they're behind the closet, behind the door racist, and then when they're out in public, they're really nice to you. That kind of a thing, because it's really interesting. Because like down there, they don't care. In the South, they'll take it to your face. I don't like you. Go back to your side of town. But here, people will just give you kind of a strange look and shy away from you, but they would never say anything. They just kind of keep it to themselves. And like when the big rally came, and they had that, what was it, the KKK rally at Washington Park. When was it? I was in Laramie going to school when they did that. When the KKK was going to come and have a rally, and then, but nobody showed up for that. The Casper people didn't come out in support of their little rally. Because I drove home for that weekend because I thought my little brother would go off the deep end, because he's a lot like Curtin, defending his race and his. But that was a final kind of a exclamation point that Casper is pretty non-racist for the most part. There are people, but they're not the majority, they're the minority. So, Casper's been pretty comfortable.
Gloria, the public schools, Carla just mentioned Kurt would defend his name instantly and very quickly. What kind of experiences did your other kids have in the public schools that you can share with us? Are you doing okay on tape? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Kenny was just easy going now. And he had no problems in school. But then, you know, like Carla says about Brother Kurt, I had to go to school a few times. But now when he got to Kelly Wash, I didn't. I think the Eastern High School got the best of them all. I don't know, they'd fight, go up behind the church, and fight, because they knew they wasn't to be caught on the school ground fighting. So their meeting place was up behind the church over there.
Were the fights racially motivated?
Yes.
They weren't racially. Some of them were, but some of them were the jocks against the cowboys, those kinds of, whatever you want to call those.
Do we still have that?
So, and then Carrie, I don't know.
Carrie had it pretty easy.
Yeah. Until he decided he wanted to be bad and grown. Mm-hmm. You know, and I just had to, well, I didn't do it. When Carrie was, 16 or something, up at Kelly Wash, I'd have to go up and talk to Coach Willie, to whoever was coaching us at that time. Because Carrie would tell us that they wouldn't play me. So, you know, and at that time, too, I ran Kelly Wash concession stand. Mm-hmm. And I was up there just about every day. So, you know, Carrie would know where to find me, or his teachers would know that I had the concession open. But as a whole, I was proud of him. He made it through. He got his diploma. So,
I understand.
Yeah, when Kenny was a senior, he was the first black homecoming king. And the homecoming king always gets to walk at halftime. They weren't going to let him walk.
What year was that?
79. Well, it would have been 78, I guess, because it was football season. But that was the big shock, because we all were up there waiting for him to come out. Mm-hmm. He just never came out, and then finally we let him come out in his uniform. We could never figure that one out either.
Who wasn't going to let him?
We don't know. They just said because he was on the team that he wasn't going to be able to come out, and they were going to have somebody stand in for him. And the coach said he can walk, and so that's how he got out there. But I don't know who was that first decision maker, because I just remember my dad saying, you know, well, where's he at? And then about after, the rest of the court had come out, and then he came out and took his place on the stand. And that was, I don't know, I think that had something to play with the issue, because that was not a popular thing.
Yeah, it's interesting.
At that time. They just...
Could we have Kurt's phone number?
237-8131.
And if it carries out of town, what about Ken?
Kenny is 234-7115.
What does Kurt do now?
He works for the Juvenile Detention Center. Good place for him.
You know, I never had a problem with that kid in class. I always enjoyed him. Kenny?
He works for Shoebox. He works. Don't interview him up there, you'll be behind yours. They'll have all you guys behind. Now, Kurt put on, he was tough. He put on a tough attitude, and he wasn't going to let you get the best of him, but he was a cool brother. I mean, he'll defend you in a heartbeat, but he was just known as the troublemaker, because if you said something to him, he was going to set you straight or make it right, because he just wasn't about being a people pleaser. He was his own person, and he was going to do what he had to do to make it in the world, and
Now, you say there's a Kurt Jr. Does Kurt have other children too? Or?
Mm-hmm.
Kanisha.
Kenesha.
Yeah.
Kanisha and Corey.
Corey.
K-O-R-E-Y.
I had already put the K's on.
Yes, that's the other thing about our family. We're all K's.
Well, how old's Kanisha now?
She's 17.
She danced at that thing the other night. Yes, I saw you both there.
Uh-huh.
Right. And Corey's how old?
8.
And Kurt's.
How, 14?
Okay, what about Kenny? Does he have kids?
Stepkids.
Stepkids.
And what about Carrie?
He has 3.
And their names and ages?
Christiana. 4. Shantika. Chevetisca. She's a stepdaughter. And she is 3. And Carrie Jr. He is 7 months.
And what does Carrie do? Is Carrie senior?
He's now a manager at Kinko's. He just got out of the military.
In where? In what town?
Savannah, Georgia.
So he got out of the military. That's
He's
what
working now in Savannah, Georgia.
Okay. Okay, can you help provide some family links for us here right now? The Jacksons are your father's, Mrs. Jackson is your father's sister.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And
Anybody else here in town?
Dorothy Burrow is my great aunt. And Mel Hamilton is a cousin. And somebody relatives. Should have told us this one before time. Who else is here?
You don't have to think right now. If you think it's something that, you'd like to have, we just want to make sure we have all the family connections and, right.
We've got
I don't know if you interviewed him, Dorothy's son, Farrell.
No, we haven't interviewed him. Is his name Burroughs too?
Cherry.
Pardon me?
Cherry. Farrell Cherry.
Farrell Cherry. What does he do?
Who
He
makes big money. That's all
he
I
does
know.
something with the
Some-
hospitals.
And their computers, their
yeah.
mainframe with those computers.
Do you have his number?
Oh, I don't know Farrell's number.
We can get it for you though. I don't know because he travels quite a bit.
Do you know Charlie Jones by any chance? Speaking of the NAACP, he's a white man who's been involved with the NAACP for a long time. He's another one I'm having trouble locating.
I don't know who that is.
that goes to our church.
Who?
Deacon Charlie.
I don't-
Does he go to your church?
Yeah.
Would you get his phone number? Jeez.
I told you
Good
that a long
time.
time ago.
Well, I can't remember everything. I'm getting old here too, Many details. You guys have other questions for him? I'm sorry, I've been blabbering away.
What's your favorite memory about living in Casper?
Does it have to be a people memory? Why I like Casper? I like Casper because of the smallness and the uniqueness. This is a family-oriented place. This is a place for family, I think. My favorite memory is being out in the middle of the street. We used to block off our street with cones, and all the kids would gather and we'd play baseball in the middle of the street with homemade bats and use Mom's tinfoil to make the ball. And we did. People think that's the funniest thing. We used to block off our streets with boxes. Josh did. We used to tell them about that. And just the neighborhood kids always. I mean, you could play. You didn't have to worry about people driving by, picking anybody's kids up because everybody in the neighborhood knew everybody, and everybody's parents were responsible for everybody else's kids. We didn't have one mom and one dad. We had a community of moms and dads. That African proverb that it takes a village to raise one child, that was true in our neighborhood because you get in trouble over here, you're going to get in trouble here, and you're going to get in trouble when you get home. And it seems like it was a hassle, but most of the people in our neighborhood turned out for the better because of having all those different people watching you and keeping you out of trouble. So I would say the family-orientedness of the neighborhood has been nice.
Family and worst memory.
don't even have any bad memories as far as Casper goes. I mean, I don't appreciate being followed around in stores and stuff like that. I think that's degrading and assuming things about people that you don't know. So I guess that would be it. Feeling like I can't be trusted when I go into a store to shop because of the color of my skin.
Are there any other people besides Farrell and, of course, I'm contacting your other kids who are here that you think that you need to talk to that maybe we haven't heard about? That's how we're getting names, is referrals as we go along. Like Grace Amie, is there anybody there you think that? I just talked to one of the Bynums and to Jerry Sweets. I'm setting up appointments with them. Is there anybody else at the church you can think of maybe we should contact?
Have you done Clementine Ross?
She won't interview.
Oh, she won't? Oh, really?
She's afraid we're just stirring things up, and she prayed to God and decided not to do it.
Okay.
And we respect her.
Oh, yeah.
We've had a few refusals for whatever reason. We respect it.
Then you might want to interview, because Valerie grew up here.
Mm-hmm.
You did the Smiths, you said you did Wardell, is that who you did?
Mm-hmm.
They're little sisters here. That's Kurt Jr.'s mom, Valerie Smith. And she would, she's probably got some different viewpoints on how she grew up too. She was a little bit ahead of me as far as schools go.
Did you by any chance know how we can get hold of her? Do you have a phone number?
265-3227. She's a Wyoming native too.
Okay.
But other than that, because most of the people that I've talked to, you guys have talked to, or been in contact with, you guys are doing a good job of weeding the people out of the shadows, I tell you.
If you think of anybody, you know, I'm going to leave you with my phone numbers
Okay.
at school and at home. Feel free to call anytime. Also, feel free to, if you have any archival information, either pictures or written that you would like to share with us, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'll be glad to pick it up, and I'll make sure we get the originals back to you in good shape. The one area that I am really weak in is I borrow this stuff, and it takes me forever, it seems, to get back. But it's always in a special stack in my room and protected, you know, and it will get back to you. So anything we can do that way. Anything else? Anything you want to close with, or?
I just to add, I think what you guys are doing is a great thing, because this is one of the steps that our school district needs to be doing, because this is something that we can pull out of the archives at Casper College and share with students and let them know that it was students of your age level that are doing this, because you guys are taking that extra step to make a change in how people think and putting a piece of history into its place, because there are a lot of kids out there that don't care.
I agree with you. I was going to finish writing this.
Wow.
Hear it all, Josh?
Do you guys learn
School?
any Black history in school?
Not
In
really.
school?
Besides
Not
the slave
really.
ships and that?
That's just about it.
See? I just got tired of it. I was through. Mom said, study your history. I don't want to read about slaves. I'm through. And that's what I wrote on my paper. What did the first thing? We were only slaves. And that's all I got to do.
You know, interestingly enough, this is my 24th year of teaching, and for about the past at least 2 decades,